Terminada a 12ª ronda negocial do Acordo de Parceria Transatlântica, o económico falou com Bill Jackson, o negociador americano do dossiê dos têxteis, uma área na qual Portugal tem interesses ofensivos. Bem-vindo a este especial entrevista. Tenho comigo o vice-representante adjunto norte-americano do comércio, Bill Jackson, que esteve em Portugal no âmbito da 12ª ronda de negociações do TTIP. Thank you very much for allowing to have this conversation and have the time to be with us. What's the purpose of your visit here in Portugal?
Well, thank you. It's great to be here in Portugal. I just came from the most recent round of negotiations on the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, in Brussels. And we thought it was important to come to Portugal because, especially in my role as a textiles negotiator, I want to better understand what the importance of this industry is in some of the key countries. And Portugal is a smaller country in the EU. It's perhaps not the biggest producer of textiles and apparel. But I would say that probably textiles and apparel is as important to Portugal's economy as for any other country in the EU. So we came here to meet with the government to talk more about the interests in the negotiations, as well as the private. Spent the last few days in Porto. It was very convenient because as I arrived there was a big exhibition and exposition Modissimo that showcased all of the different products that Portugal is producing and exporting in the textile and apparel sector. So I got a very good view of that, and also had a chance to meet with many representatives of the private sector. And
what were the concerns that those representatives presented to you?
Well, I would say that they were less concerns than interests. Everyone in the industry here understands that this agreement could be a tremendous boon. It could be a big benefit for Portugal because Portugal has already been experiencing a significant increase in its textile and apparel exports to the United States. And if we're successful in this agreement, and we eliminate the tariffs and remove other barriers to trade, we could see a significant increase in Portugal's exports, which means jobs, it means opportunities. And so I think everyone is excited about it, and they're eager to see the thing come to conclusion.
But we also can have cheaper imports from the U.S.
That's right. It is a free trade agreement that goes in both directions. We are very interested in selling more of our products here, especially our exports to Portugal have been inputs, yarns and fabrics especially. But Portugal exports about 30 times more of these products to the United States than vice versa. So there are, I think, special opportunities for Portugal.
There are some expectations that we, in the next, if a deal is signed, of course, in the next 3 to 4 years, we have an increase in our exports to the U.S., rounding about $700 million. Do you think that expectation is too positive?
I can't speak to the individual economic analyses that have been done on this, but everyone that I've seen has Portugal being a winner, especially in not just in textiles and apparel, but in other product areas, in some of the agricultural products, some of the other industrial products. And, you know, we already have a huge trade going back and forth across the Atlantic. Over $2 billion every day in trade goes back and forth. And it only stands to reason that if we eliminate the barriers to trade, both tariffs and non-tariff barriers, that we're going to see those exports go up in both directions.
Textiles is a sector where we have an average tariff higher than in the other industries, and a lot of peaks in tariffs. So this makes the negotiation harder or easier, because there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, I think it creates greater opportunities, because clearly when you have an average tariff, which on the U.S. side, the average tariff is maybe 16% or so on textile and apparel products. And I believe going in the other direction, the U.S. Exports to the European Union, the average tariff is in the 10% category, which is significantly higher than the other industrial tariffs. So there are really great opportunities there. But it also creates challenges, because when you have such a tremendous tariff benefit, there are those who would like to exploit the situation. And so there would be circumvention and fraud, and in either direction someone could sew a label on saying that it came from the EU or it came from the US, and that wasn't the case. So part of the negotiations is to put into place provisions that will prevent that and promote greater cooperation between our customs authorities so that the benefits of this agreement stay in the EU and the US and you don't have free riders.
And what's on the table right now in terms of tariff reductions? This week in Brussels, where do we stand?
Well, I think that there is a broad agreement on both sides that what we want to do is eliminate as many tariffs as possible on day one of this agreement. And in all of our free trade agreements with the U.S., all of our tariffs go to zero, sometimes after a phase-in period. I think that what's different about this agreement is that there is a strong interest in taking almost all, if not all, possibly all of the tariffs to zero, eliminating these taxes, these tariffs on day one. And so that's what we're working towards.
And do you feel that you have all EU member states on board on this? Because as we said, as you said in the beginning of our conversation, not the textile and apparel industry hasn't the same weight on all European economies. So there are countries that are more eager to get, like Italy, for instance, to get a good agreement on this. And do you feel that textile could be in a second place or a bargain chip to other dossiers in the negotiation?
Well, I think that countries do have a different approach to the negotiations, depending perhaps on the balance in their countries between the textile side and the apparel side. Those who create the manufacture the apparel are usually interested in having as open a market as possible for the inputs, the fabrics and the yarns. And so they want to open the market and use fabrics from outside of the region, whereas those who produce the yarns and the fabrics want to make sure that their products are the ones that are going into the finished product. And so sometimes there's a little tension there within that private sector community and between some of the countries. We have that on our side as well. Some of the big retailers would like to eliminate the tariffs and make it very, very open, whereas those who produce some of the inputs say, no, we want to make sure that our products are going in. So that's one of the tensions that you have in the negotiation. Now, so far as textiles in the context of the other areas of the negotiations, we negotiate textiles as a very specific subset of the overall negotiations. And in the end, our political authorities will look at the entire package and see what sort of balances and trade-offs there were across the different areas.
And where do you feel the agreement is being harder to reach? In which dossier?
Well, I think that probably the most challenging area with respect to textiles is finding a common approach to what we call the rules of origin. Just going back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago about the inputs
of international chains.
And the United States and the EU have taken slightly different approaches to that topic in their different free trade agreements. And so that's one of the things that we're doing now, is trying to find common ground there.
But in relation to the whole package that you mentioned, then the political authorities will look at, where do you feel you are more far behind?
Well, I don't know that I would say far behind. I would say that there are particular challenges in other areas, and these are the traditional areas. I mean, let's face it, on both sides of the Atlantic there are sensitivities with respect to agricultural products. There are sensitivities with respect to regulatory issues and investment issues. And so those are financial services. These are some of the things that I would say are most intensive, being negotiated most intensively.
Okay. And do you believe that even with those challenges, it's going to be possible to reach an agreement by the end of the year?
Both parties, the EU and the US, our political authorities have given us direction to complete the agreement this year. It won't be easy. There are a lot of things ahead of us. But I think that we've already seen in the most recent round this week in Brussels an acceleration of the talks. And we don't confine our negotiations to the formal rounds. In between the rounds, we have video conferences and phone calls, and we go back and forth. So I think that there can and should be a conclusion to this agreement this year. Again, we don't want to get it done just to get it done. We want it to be comprehensive. We want it to be high quality. We want it to address everyone's interests.
You will not settle for less?
No, no.
That's a promise.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time. Este especial entrevista fica por aqui. Fique connosco.